So, the way Al-Juwayni, as I'm claiming in that paper, resolved the problem of that relation between the historical reality and the rational claims of the sovereign is through first securing multiple rationalities, so you don't have a linear rationality. You don't have one form of reason like Plato or Hegel. Plato is a one dimension, is a one deal man. Okay, you either go to the forms or you don't know the truth. Okay, so he accepts multiple rationalities and he accepts the complexities, okay, of interpretation that will mediate between that. So the sovereign is not really hierarchical, and this is one of the biggest issues in the conception of sovereign. Now, why do I mention Schmitt? The paper mentions a guy that I didn't talk about very quickly. I'm going to mention him, Carl Schmitt. Because Carl Schmitt is one of the most famous political philosophers. He was actually a friend of the guy I mentioned a few minutes ago, Levi Strauss. But of course, they hated each other because Levi Strauss was a Jew, and Carl Schmitt became the ultimate political theorist of Nazi Germany. So I don't need to explain why they hated each other. Okay, so Carl Schmitt wrote a brilliant book, actually. And this guy is quite amazing if you look at his life. He lived after the age of 90 something, and anyway, and he managed to come back. I mean, they tried, but of course, he was banned from teaching after World War II, and nobody cared about him for like after the 70s and 80s. But now, if you go to political theory departments, oh my God, there is a Schmittian revival. Everyone's talking about Schmitt. Okay? Not because everyone is becoming Nazi, don't get me wrong, but because everyone is losing faith in the promise of the liberal democratic state. And let's go back to Plato. Okay? So, but before we do that, very quickly, what was the theory of Schmitt? Very quickly, he came up with, he wrote a book, very small book, I encourage you all to read it, it's not more than 120 pages, called Political Theology. And then he talked about the state of exception, the al-Ummam. Okay, what is the state of exception? He says all of those liberal guys, Kant, Hegel, Rousseau, all of that generation, 18th, 19th, after me, they were assuming that political judgment and the judgments of the sovereign, whether the judgments made by the members of the body politic, let's go back to the double meaning of politia, or the constituents or members of, the people who are governing or the people who are being governed, let's put it this way, are going to be rational. Okay? He says, this is baloney. This is nonsense. People are not rational in their decision. And of course, at his time, he had handy his very good friend, Martin Heidegger, the great founder of contemporary existentialism. And not only Martin Heidegger, there was like 20 or 30 years from the late 19th century, from Nietzsche onwards. Okay? And not only in Germany, but also in France and all of these places, in all of Europe, heavy criticism of rationalism and romanticism and rational romanticism. Extreme criticism. This is when you get Leibniz's philosophy and people talking about living the life, and Nietzsche talking about the criticizing the Victorian age and saying these were too Apollonian, and he said we don't need Apollo, the god of reason, we need Dionysius, the god of sex and wine and virility. Okay, and this is when Europeans start getting a little bit crazy. This is where you get those nudist movements in Germany and expressionism and everyone taking off their clothes at the lakes and stuff. Anyway, so that stuff was happening at this time, and this is the moment actually where that existential decisionism comes out. That in other words, you cannot reduce decisions to rational judgment. And this doesn't happen. And he goes through brilliantly through theories of sociology and legal theory and proves that very well. So, what is the conclusion? Herr Schmitt. Okay, not Mr. this time. Okay, what is the conclusion, Herr Schmitt? Well, the conclusion is frightening. He said simply there is no way around the arbitrariness of political decision, and hence do not expect neither the sovereign nor the people being governed by the sovereign to be rational. So, what is it? Accept dictatorship and pledge your allegiance to the Führer. That is the end of the book. Okay? So it's a little bit refined. The end is not very nice. Now, of course, there are ways in which people are. I mean, there are all of those Heideggerians from the late night. You are familiar with Giorgio Agamben. Anyone read Agamben? Giorgio Agamben, and in America, of course, you have Wendy Brown and Judith Butler and all of those people who are doing reinterpretations of Schmitt in their attempt to critique, because actually we are living, if you think about it. Okay? The liberal state now is going to that, or think of Trump as a state of exception. If you look at the discourse, forget about all of the philosophy that I said now about Schmitt. Just follow CNN, which is usually pathetic, I'm sure you know. Okay, follow CNN's discourse every night. What do they usually say? This is not normal. As a matter of fact, that term has been used systematically in the last few weeks. The new normal. Please go verify, fact check it on Anderson Cooper and all of these shows. They are always saying Trump is making a new normal. This is not normal. All of the liberal media in the US is using that rhetoric. What does the new normal, what does it mean that this is not normal? It's an exception. It is a state of exception. And all what Trump did was essentially, I mean, not I'm depending on him, but Trump was just using the power that he had. And expressing in a way that is usually veiled by the liberal state, okay, that the decision cannot be rational. Did people before him do? Of course, let's take his great predecessor, Mr. Obama. What did Obama do? He used drones to kill an American citizen in Yemen against international law. Here is your state. This is Hadi Ausnam. The war in Iraq, an Ausnam. And this is precisely what Schmitt wanted to say. Schmitt wanted to say that if you are going to talk about sovereignty, it's sheer power. Don't talk to me about reason and checks and balances, and this is all rhetoric. Okay? It is just the state of exception. So, you have two models, essentially. Either that you try to mediate the transcendence of reason, okay, which is to me the middle solution in a certain way. Okay, and this is why I find Juwayni very interesting. And not only Juwayni, I find traces of Juwayni in the theory of imagination of Al-Farabi, which is brilliant, because he talks about how the Prophet mediates between the philosophers' universal ideas and the community in order to make a harmonious society. So you either try to do the mediating part, okay, which will never be perfect and will always have ups and downs. That is just the reality of things, okay, and accept it with its possibilities, which to me, or you go the Schmittian method. But from my humble perspective, all of the attempts that try to linearize, if I may use this as a verb, reason, and to claim that you can have somehow, some way, a translucence between rational concepts governing the society and and the rationality of the people completely fail. Either simply because people cannot be fully rational, or they are rational in different ways, and you cannot expect them to be rational in a linear way. Okay, so you have to mediate rationality to them, either, as I said, by using the example of Islamic law in a traditional way, or and you have to use imagery. This is why Al-Farabi talks about imagination, to mediate these things to them. Or, and hence also another thing, to leave the ultimate judgment to those scholars who are committed, but at the same time do not have power, and to leave those who have power to guard from outside, as I said, the functional guardian, or just to continue with the idea of sovereignty, which has governed us, namely through the modern theory of the modern state, which has governed or ruled the world for the last 400 years, and accept its consequences. It made the promise of liberalism. It made the promise that there will be freedom, but I think that it's not working, because usually it goes back to the power of the elites. whether the power of the elite is and the power of the elite is never rational. It's exactly what Schmitt said. Whether the elite is a crazy Führer, an ideologue, or an ideologue and a racist, or the elite are corporates, which is what we have right now. So it's the idea that you can have the promise of rationality, or full rationality, is impossible. So the only way is immediate. And I think here, that's the last thing I want to say because I'm really very tired and I think I exhausted you as well. Why Schmitt called it political theology? I forgot to mention that. Because of the notion of the miracle. What does the miracle do? How do prophets prove their prophecy? It suspends the rational law, right? This is precisely what the sovereign does. He suspends and proves his power, just like the prophet suspends reason and proves his power. And Juwayni, if you look at the theory, and unfortunately there isn't enough literature at all at the brilliant arguments that the Ash'aris in particular made about the notion of mu'jiza in the history of Kalam. They say something very interesting, Juwayni and Ghazali and all of them. They say, first of all, mu'jiza and the work of magic are by no means different, objectively speaking. So you find David Copperfield and say you are watching David Copperfield and Jesus, both of them walking on water. How would you know which one is the prophet? So the act itself cannot tell you. They say that both, but what tells you is the context and the judgment of the rational subject inside the context. So there is again the emphasis on contextual rationality and the judgment of the subject based on her or his rational background in the context. I know it might sound very loose, okay? Just like the Islamic State at its height was quite loose because you had all of these systems of legal judgment, but it worked when people were committed. And to me, that is a far better solution, okay, than veiling, okay, rationality under a veiling dictatorship, which is precisely the language that Schmitt uses. He said, there is a veiling of dictatorship under the guise of rationality. That's it. And lastly, from a methodological perspective, I hope that the methodology part came across. That is how to read the text for the structure of things. When I was looking, I was familiar with Schmitt, and I was trained in the liberal tradition because I'm simply a Kantian. Okay? So when I was looking at Juwayni, okay, a few years ago when I started writing this paper, it immediately struck me how he was using the state of exception to justify the essence of sovereignty, just like Schmitt did. And that is how I started building that. So this is one way, from a methodological perspective, that you can do that. Of course, you do not just go by similarities. You go by the steps of the argument. And the steps of the argument are very key. There are three fundamental principles involved in the argument of both Juwayni and Schmitt: sovereignty, exception, and reason. Okay? And both of them are dealing with it. In addition, of course, to theology and merit. Okay? And both both thinkers are dealing with that. The question is, how do each one use it? And this is how you can put these two thinkers in conversation with each other, despite them being almost 1,000 years away from each other. Because the problem is the same. The fundamental questions is the same. Okay? Yes, there might be shifts in the concept of rationality. Okay? I'm not denying that. Okay? But the main problem is the same. And the problem is the one I started with. How can you relate the transcendence of reason with the fabric of social and cultural life? It was clear in the mind of Juwayni, coming from the Mehna and all of these things that I talked about, and the absolutist view that was imposed. Yes, his view of reason might be completely different from those of the liberal thinkers like Kant and Hegel and all of these people, but it is the same problem. And this is why people responded, thankfully, in a very positive way to this paper when it came out. Okay? So, This is what I hope people will be always trying to do, is to think philosophically about the fundamental question in whichever field you are doing it. I was not trying to promote my work or anything. I was just trying to use that as an example of how you can bring an idea that was written by a Muslim philosophical theologian, sitting in books for ages, okay? And nobody is bringing it to bear on a thinker that, as I told you right now, everyone is talking about him. Butler is talking, Agamben is talking about him, Sheila bin Habib is talking, J-Jack, even though I'm not very fond of him, but he's talking about Schmidt. All of these guys are talking about Schmidt. Why? Because there is a realization that the liberal project is coming to its end. That's it. Thank you.